Welcome to the DAMES webinar series. DAMES aims to empower parents through education. This webinar focuses on feeding matters. Enjoy!
Hi DAMES members, welcome to the DAMES webinar series. Today we are so excited to have Feeding Matters with us. Heidi Vandermolen, I think I nailed it, is here today to talk to us about Feeding Matters. Now, when I heard about this organization, I could not wait to have them on to talk about what they do and how they help families in Arizona, but all around the nation. And she was even telling me internationally. And so I'm so excited. Without further ado, here is Heidi to tell us all about Feeding Matters. Thanks for being here today, Heidi.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. And I am just so thrilled to be able to share our resources with your group. And it's there. Okay. So before I begin, I just would like to kind of introduce myself so you know where I'm coming from. Again, my name is Heidi. I am program manager at Feeding Matters, and I also am mother to Hayden Jude, my 11-year-old son, who was born with a chromosome disorder called 18q deletion. With this diagnosis comes many challenges, as I'm sure all of you are aware with your children. He has a dual sensory loss, so he wears full-time glasses and hearing aids. He is considered deaf-blind. He also is nonverbal, non-ambulatory. He can walk with assistance, and sometimes trying to get him to walk is like wrestling a pig, but we do it. And most importantly, for me, the hardest struggle with Hayden's diagnosis was feeding. Since birth, he has struggled, and it has just been such an overwhelming journey. No mother ever expects or thinks their child won't breastfeed or bottle feed. And so for me, when Hayden was diagnosed with failure to thrive, and I recall being in the geneticist's office with a little 2-ounce bottle trying to get him to drink that. And it just was exhausting. My days were spent trying to get him to drink a bottle because he couldn't breastfeed. He just didn't have the muscle tone. And, for months, I just was exhausted trying to pump, trying to feed. And all along, my son's doctor and my mom, who was a retired nurse, just kept telling me, put in a feeding tube, be done with it, just put in the tube. And I did not want to do that to my son. And how I became involved with Feeding Matters, I was looking for any type of resources, and I came across Feeding Matters. And when I was able to hop on their forum and ask other parents, like, hey, what is a feeding tube? Should I do this? Have I failed my child? Being able to hear other parents' stories about, oh yeah, it was the best decision. We put in an NG tube or we have a G tube. And it really made me feel like I wasn't a failure. And I had quality information from other families that this was the best choice for my son. Put in a feeding tube so he gets the energy, the calories that he needs, so that we can focus on feeding without the stress of making sure he remains on the growth chart. So that's really the background with me and my son. Again, he's 11. I still feed him. I make all of his meals because he does have food allergies. But because of Feeding Matters and the resources that they offer, I feel educated. I feel confident. I enjoy meal times with my son. And that's really what I hope for other families who are struggling. And I know our journey isn't always the same, but we just really want to have resources available to families whose child is struggling with feeding. For those of you who are unaware of Feeding Matters, we are here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are the first organization in the world that unites healthcare professionals, families, and the community to improve the system of care for infants and children with pediatric feeding disorder. Some background on our organization. In 2006, Shannon Goldwater, whose triplets were born extremely premature, they struggled with feeding, they gagged, they turned blue, they choked, they vomited. And with Shannon, she, reached out to Arizona doctors outside of Arizona, and she really just felt compelled to do something about it. She knew she could not be the only parent struggling with this. And from there, she actually met Chris Lynn, our former CEO, whose daughter was struggling too, to the point where Chris had to go into the emergency room with Emily, and she flat out refused to leave until someone looked at her daughter. And it turns out Emily had been silently aspirating. So the weight gain on the chart was actually water filling into her lungs. And from there, Shannon and Chris, truly the first two family coaches, together working with the healthcare professionals that help their children, created Feeding Matters. And we, as Michelle mentioned, we engage over 144,000 individuals, both here in the US and internationally. And that means we've got volunteers and families from Brazil, Portugal, Australia, Japan. And they just keep contacting us. So again, Feeding Matters is really trying to share as many resources and education as possible. And our PFD Alliance helps do that. And they are comprised of, again, top feeding experts, family members, and the community who really understands pediatric feeding disorder. We are focused on our 4 pillars: education, advocacy, research, and support. And we rely 100% on funding from the grants, foundations, and our individual donors. And that being said, unfortunately, I don't have a slide of it, but pre-pandemic, we have our annual fundraiser held at the Biltmore as a lunch. This year, we will be doing a virtual event, and it will actually take place a week from today, Thursday, November 12th at 9 a.m. Arizona time. And if any of you would like to attend, I'm happy to share the link with you, share the link with Michelle. You can also go to our website and register there. The family that is being highlighted is so resilient, and I think you will just really understand and enjoy listening to them talk about what they've been through with their son Ram's pediatric feeding disorder, but also during a time where we're all isolated. And again, when your child is struggling, the isolation that comes with that, we're all familiar, but then you throw on a worldwide pandemic, and that just makes it so much harder. You worry about, am I going to be able to find the special formula that my child needs? Or I know for me personally, my son has food allergies and uses diet yogurt because it's something A, he can safely eat, and B, it stays on the spoon. But since the pandemic, I can't find it anywhere. And so, these concerns are very real, very valid, on top of trying to stay positive and understand the new norm of how our world is working these days. Back in 2016, Feeding Matters brought together top experts of all the domains: GI doctors, registered dietitian nutritionists, psychologists, family members, and together created a consensus paper on PFD and the importance of a standalone diagnosis. Within that paper, pediatric feeding disorder is described as impaired oral intake that is not age appropriate and is associated with medical, nutritional, feeding skill, and or psychosocial dysfunction. These are what we consider the 4 domains of pediatric feeding disorder. Again, if you don't have a child who's struggling, you may not know this issue even exists. And PFD can cause feeding to be painful when swallowing or chewing. And that, again, if your child has silent reflux and you're unaware of it, it could hurt for them to swallow, which, again, can result in choking. Or say your child has sensory issues or texture issues, and they're choking at every meal or gagging or vomiting. All of that can lead to your child refusing to eat. If your child is not eating, there's a reason. It's not, oh, they're a picky eater or it's a phase. There's a reason. And if you constantly are feeding your child or, there's vomiting involved, this is going to lead to very stressful meal times. And again, I know children who are on the autism spectrum are 90% at risk for developing a PFD, which, meal times should be enjoyable. Your child should trust you. You should trust your child. But when your child has PFD, sometimes that just doesn't happen. And I know for me personally, it was exhausting. I was constantly stressed. I have just book after book after book of what my son was eating, how many calories, if he vomited, if he, was feeling upset, if he had a bowel movement. And when you're that overwhelmed and your main focus is getting your child to eat, it is just, again, isolating, overwhelming, and very depressing to have to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, I have to feed my child. Is he going to eat? Is he not going to eat? As a parent, I felt my mood was directly related to Hayden's eating. If he ate and had a good day, then I was a good mom. I had a good day. The next day, if he shut down eating and wouldn't, touch a thing, I was a bad mom. And that just is not what we want for families. PFD can be mild, where perhaps your child was born slightly premature, has a lip tie or tongue tie, or just needs a little help with feeding therapy in order to learn how to safely chew and swallow. Or it could be more severe, where your child has more medical issues going on, and they require a feeding tube. And that's okay. I mean, we support any type of feeding and any type of PFD, and our resources are there to help families through this. I mentioned the 4 domains of PFD written in the consensus paper. One thing that I really want to explain to families is that if your child is struggling with feeding, it's not just, again, he's a picky eater, it's a phase, he'll grow out of it. You don't just look at behavior. The 4 domains are meant to, first of all, medically rule anything out. Is there anything anatomically going on? Does your child have reflux? Is he on medication for that? Is there food allergies involved? From there, looking at nutrition, does my child require special formula? Again, bumping up the calories. Maybe you need to do something extra for your breast milk. but making sure working with a registered dietitian to ensure that your child is getting the nutrients that they need to thrive. And then the feeding skill. Again, if your child is pocketing food or spits it out, doesn't have a safe swallow, or perhaps has dysphagia, it's really important to have your child evaluated for their skill level so that you can match what you're feeding them with their age and you can safely feed them. The final domain is psychosocial. Again, I mentioned when feeding is stressful for the parent and the child, that can create an unhealthy relationship at mealtimes. And it's important to work with a psychologist who can help create those positive mealtime environments instead of constantly having the same battle of keeping your chair in a high or keeping your child in a high chair, force feeding, or using distractions. Again, no parent should ever dread feeding their child, and no child should be afraid of feeding. So that's why it's so important to look at all four domains, because one dysfunction in any of those domains could cause a serious disability if it's not treated and identified early on. Again, pediatric feeding disorder is an issue that is very underserved. We recently had a prevalence study published digitally in the Journal of Pediatrics. And just to give you an idea of just how common this is, more than 1 in 37 children have a PFD. And again, cerebral palsy is 1 in 323 children, and autism is 1 in 54. PFD is more than 1 in 37 children. And that's why it is so important that Feeding Matters is bringing awareness to this issue so that these children, these infants and children, are identified early on instead of having to suffer for 2 or 3 or 4 years before coming to us wanting help, wanting resources. Again, unless you have a child who is struggling, people don't know. For us parents whose child has been diagnosed with failure to thrive, well, that's basically saying, like, I'm a failure to feed my son. I'm failing as a mom. It's difficult to explain to other people because, again, culturally, families, we just assume, your child will eat when they're hungry. You must be doing something wrong, or it's all in your head. Just sit down, make them eat dinner as a family, and be done with it. And then because PFD has not been, considered a real issue, parents are left not knowing how to help their child. And that's why it's so important that PFD has its own classification, which, again, very, very excited to announce that in just 5 short years of collaborating with families and the healthcare professionals, the consensus paper was written, the prevalence paper written, published, and now the CDC has officially approved PFD as its own standalone diagnosis, and it will be in the ICD-11 on October 1st of 2021. What this means is that infants and children will be identified early, and families will not have to pay out of pocket. We are working with insurance companies to make sure that treatment and evaluation are covered, and that healthcare professionals are getting paid as well, because right now they don't have that. And so a lot of times, I know for my son, it was diagnosed with malnutrition, mismanagement, failure to thrive, and those are not easy diagnoses to hear as a mom. So we could not be more thrilled. And It's so exciting because December here in Arizona and in South Carolina have been we have been approved to have PFD Awareness Month. So that is just going to bring so much more awareness to this issue and to help families when it comes to their child's pediatric feeding disorder. I'd like to take a little bit of time to go over our pillars, starting with education. Um, we do have on our website information on our conferences, webinars. Right now, actually in 2020, we hosted our first entirely virtual conference. Some of those sessions are available on our website. Our 2021 virtual conference will be held April 29th and 30th. And the great thing about this conference is it's education for healthcare professionals. The presenters are, again, top experts on the research, evaluation, and treatment of PFD. But we also have a family panel. So for those families who are out there struggling, hearing other families talk about what they're going through and offering hope and suggestions and resources is just so incredibly helpful. And so I highly recommend looking into our conference. We also have a learning center that offers, again, not just our webinars and conferences, but other organizations throughout the US that offer SOS training. So if you're a feeding therapist, or if you're a mom or a parent or caregiver wanting to learn more, you can hop on the Learning Center, look at the virtual workshops. I don't think we have any in person at this time, but stay tuned because I'm sure as we move along, we will be going back to in person learning. We also offer free webinars for families. The one that I highly recommend is with Heather Joy Magdalano. It's on resilience. And we have another free webinar on telehealth. When this first started, it's a very new field, especially when it comes to offering feeding therapy via Zoom or Google Hangouts. So I highly recommend looking into those resources. If you can't afford the cost of the webinar, please reach out to me and I will work on getting you a code where you can view it for free. Our advocacy efforts, again, I mentioned the consensus paper being published, the prevalence paper being published. It's so important for Feeding Matters to do research on that. So again, thank you so much, Michelle, for giving me this opportunity to share our resources and to bring awareness through this work or this presentation. We also do other speaking engagements. We have done, recently we were an exhibitor at the AAP conference, and we have another one, actually the Infant Summit had one of our PFD Alliance chair people talking about PFD. So it's really important that we spread education and awareness to as many communities as possible so that we're reaching as many families that we can, so that no family has to go through this alone. Which brings me to research. Again, I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with our infant and child feeding questionnaire, which is a pre-screening tool online. Basically, a family who is worried about their child's eating can go to the questionnaire, type, fill out the child's birth date. It will adjust for prematurity. It'll ask a series of questions. Once you complete the questionnaire, it will pop up any red flags as well as typically behaviors for feeding for your child at that age. And the great thing about this tool is that you can print it, you can email it, so that you can have an honest conversation with your child's pediatrician. So many times, families go to their, their child's well check visit. And again, pediatricians only have maybe 8 to 10 minutes to go through everything. And if your child is on the growth charts and you don't talk to your pediatrician about, well, yeah, my child is growing, but I have to feed him while he's sleeping, or I have to follow him around constantly all day to ensure he eats, or my child is on Pediasure. Without that information, pediatricians don't understand what PFD is. So, with the infant and child feeding questionnaire, we're hoping to educate more pediatricians so that these infants and children can be identified at well check visits. And I will say there are 6 questions within the questionnaire that are predictive of a PFD. And again, going back to our website, you can download the RAC card. The RAC card has those 6 questions and the answers, so that if you're not sure if your child has a PFD, take the questionnaire, whether it's the full questionnaire or if you want to start with the 6 questions. But that's a great place to start. And then Feeding Matters also partners with the pediatric feeding community on research so that we can advance the evaluation and treatment of PFD. Currently, there is no certificate that makes someone qualified to do feeding therapy. The occupational therapist, the speech language pathologist, physical therapist, they get maybe one course, one semester on feeding and swallowing and dysphagia. So we have been working with universities to create an information toolkit on PFD so that, they are getting the proper education instead of having these OTs or SLPs, decide that they're passionate about feeding and they take it on themselves to further their education. So long term, that's what we're really hoping to do with Feeding Matters, and it just takes a village to get that research out there. And then the final pillar, which is very near and dear to my heart, is the family support. One of our programs is called The Power of Two. The Power of Two is where a family who is struggling or is new to this journey would reach out, fill out a request for support, and I would match them with a family coach. Our family coaches are parents who have had firsthand experience with their own child's PFD. And again, I wish when I was going through it, I wish I had someone who could kind of tell me, oh, okay, so these are the steps that you need to take, instead of spending hours Googling like what to do, how do we do feeding therapy, and what a homemade blenderized diet is. So our family coaches offer that one-to-one support from a parent who literally gets it, who has been through those endless nights when the feeding tube alarm goes off, or your child has just vomited everything that you put through the tube, or maybe you're just really feeling depressed and isolated because of your child not eating. They also offer our resources, including the provider directory, which hosts over 500 different feeding therapists, intensive feeding programs, and specialists. Our resource library, which hosts articles, published research, handouts, products, books. So again, especially during a pandemic, if you can't find a feeding therapist in your area, we have, again, books that you can read about, webinars that you can take. And then I'm so excited to present that we recently created a family guide, and the family guide can be accessed again through our website. And all you need to do is just fill out a brief survey to access the guide. And the guide acts as consider it a PFD 101, where it gives you enough education on PFD and the next steps, but it was created as to not to overwhelm families. Because again, when you're new to this journey and you're being told your child has PFD or is, struggling, they're not on the growth charts, you may need a feeding tube, you may need a fundoplication, all of this can be so overwhelming. We just really wanted parents to have A, the education on what PFD means, B, to know that they're not alone in this journey and that it's not their fault. They've done nothing wrong. They're not to blame. And then C, the next steps, like how to find a therapist, what an evaluation looks like, and just helpful resources to help them. And it's all in one place, the family guide. So I highly recommend looking through that. Again, we were able to create this guide through the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust. And it is before the pandemic. Our goal was to have a hard copy of the guide in pediatrician's office and tracking how many parents get it, how we can improve it. So again, that's what the survey is for, so that we can go ahead and see how many families are using it, send out a survey as to how we can improve it when it comes time for the second year. And again, pediatric feeding disorder is not just here in Arizona, it is in all around the US, internationally, and that's why Feeding Matters is not just another feeding center. We needed to create a virtual health resource platform in order to reach as many people as possible, 24/7 for both healthcare professionals and for our families. Eventually, we're really hoping that we will have a Feeding Matters app where parents who need education can just click and have the information and resources at their fingertips. So stay tuned on that. And then I just finally would like to give a shout out to our champions at Feeding Matters. Our board of directors are really, they guide our organization. Our PFD Alliance, formerly the Medical Professional Council, who Shannon and Chris really worked with their kids, they guide our strategic planning. And then our Family Advisory Council, who consists of parents and caregivers, they are our sounding board and our voice for families and the services that we offer. And then again, without our community advisors being our champion, our partners, our donors, and all of our volunteers, we could not do what we're doing. We would not have pediatric feeding disorder have its own standalone diagnosis. We wouldn't have PFD Awareness Month and the incredible amount of time and energy that they take to not just our family coaches helping support families through this, but the PFD Alliance chair members and the general volunteers who work on research project for us. Again, I just cannot say enough about everyone who is involved with Feeding Matters. And that is the end of the presentation. Michelle, I'm not sure if at this point you would like to go through some questions or if you'd like me to hop on the website to show where the resources are.
Yeah, I would love a tour of the website. Why don't we do that?
Okay. Sharing this and okay. So can you see the website okay?
Yeah, looks great.
Awesome. So in regards to family support, under resources and support, you'll see the family guide here. And then all you need to do is click on get the guide, fill out the survey, and it will give you access to the guide. Our in need of a family coach, then you would go to family support. And up here, you would request support and you would just fill out this quick, short form. And then I would work on matching you with a coach based on what type of support you're looking for, what type of feeder your child is. Again, we try to match you with a coach that has a very similar situation, so that that connection is good. If at any point, if you're matched with a coach and it may not be the right fit, then please contact me and I will work on matching you with another coach. Currently, we have 53 coaches. And for those of you whose child is struggling with a pediatric feeding disorder or feeding and you want to help other families, please, by all means, fill out the form to volunteer as a family coach. And that can be located under Get Involved, Volunteer, and then Power of Two Coach. And then you would just fill out the form. And then again, we would set you up with the training and the other family coaches. And the great thing about being a coach is, again, having a child with a PFD is kind of like a roller coaster. You have these really, really awesome days, and then you have a day where, oh my gosh, he's lost 2 pounds, it's flu season, I'm completely panicked. But you can share those ups and downs with other family coaches and as well as the families that you support. And so it's really, we always say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. So again, if anyone is interested in volunteering, we would love to have you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Then I would also like to, if you're interested in the event, it is right here. So all you would have to do is just click reserve your seat and register. If any of you want to sit at my virtual table, feel free. When you're registering, you would just say choose Heidi Vandermolen's table, or if you want to, just register, invite family and friends. It's super easy. Again, it's only 37 minutes, and the family that is being highlighted is truly amazing. And I think just listening to Dustin and Kavita talk about what they've been through in their journey can really offer hope and just show you how resilient we all are during this time. Let's see. Our international conference can be located here. We have not opened up registration yet, but we will be doing so shortly. The PFD Alliance is located here. And then, let's see, actually, let me walk you through the infant and child feeding questionnaire. If you scroll all the way down, here is the infant and child feeding questionnaire wrap card. These are the 6 questions that are predictive of a pediatric feeding disorder. And then if you want to take the entire questionnaire, it can be located here. And again, it's super easy. You can print it, you can email it to your child's pediatrician. And that way, if you have a concern, if your child is on the growth chart, but you are having to take extreme measures to ensure that that happens, use this. Have that honest conversation with your child's doctor so that your voice is heard. And, it could also be maybe you're worried, you take the questionnaire and everything's fine. At least you know that your child has typical behaviors during meal times. Let's see. What is PFD? Goes over again more information on the 4 domains. So we also have the article on the consensus and diagnostic code here available. Michelle, is there anything else you can think of that you'd like me? We do have our blog. Let me just quick show you that. So these, we have stories from families, our Shine the Light series, the Power of Resilience. So again, in your free time. If you'd like to read some of our blogs, we do have both family stories and healthcare professionals. So I think that's about it. Anything that I'm missing, Michelle?
No, thank you for taking us through that, though. I thought that was very informative, and I love how easy that website is to navigate for parents and for families, and the resources that you have on there, the questionnaire and the um, the things that you can provide to parents so that they can ease into having those bigger conversations, I think are just so critical because we're not often confident enough to walk into a pediatric doctor's office and say, hey, I think that there's something wrong with my child. But if you have a tool or a survey or something that's just helping you guide that conversation, I think that's just amazing, and so helpful for parents so that we can feel like we kind of know what we're talking about and that our concerns are justified when we talk to a doctor.
And listening to you talk, so the provider directory, I'll just quick go through this. This is where you would type in your zip code, and then let's see. And then the distance you're willing to travel, do a search. You can also be more specific, whether you're looking for outpatient, inpatient, specialist, and it pulls up this lovely little map with the information. So again, it's super easy. It will direct you to their website so that you can learn more information about the services. And then the Learning Center is where we have our on-demand workshops. If you go to community workshops and conferences, that's where you'll see other webinars, other conferences that are not our Feeding Matters programs, but they're still, very good education opportunities. So our on-demand workshops are through our legacy workshops, and this is where you'll find them.
Yes. That's awesome. I think it's just really impressive. First of all, thank you for sharing your story in the very beginning, and for telling us about how you got involved with Feeding Matters and that it was because your son was having feeding difficulties. And so then you became involved in a program whose mission was very much paired to yours as a parent, right? Helping other families overcome these obstacles. I feel like companies that do this sort of thing are so good at getting results and getting things done because it is an internal passion of that person or people who are in the organization that are pushing for change and are seeing a need in the community and are coming together to fill it. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. I have a science background, and so my nerdydom goes crazy when I hear all of this stuff and what the company has been able to what the charity has been able to accomplish since it started. I mean, not only to, get research papers supporting that it should be an individual diagnosis, but also getting that recognition from the CDC. That's huge. That's like monumental, right?
We're very, very pleased.
I mean, you kind of you're talking about it, and I'm just sitting here going, "Oh my God!" That sends goosebumps. I always get goosebumps, but goosebumps just talking about it because that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of effort to do that.
And again, I mean, without the amazing volunteers that we have, the PFD Alliance, and just, again, all the families that have come out and shared their stories and worked together to create this. It's just, again, being a mom of a child who has so many extras.
Yeah.
It's being able to help other families so that they don't have to go through this journey, and just having the resources there for them to make that portion a little less stressful for them. That is definitely something that I feel very fortunate to be able to do through Feeding Matters.
Yeah. Yes. I am a parent mentor for raising special kids, and I can tell you making those connections with other parents and helping them through that first year or two or however long we're friends. I don't have a limit. I will be your friend forever and help you as long as I can. But it's so self-fulfilling, right? To be able to like give and help and share your experience with somebody else. Um, yeah, I'm just completely blown away. I really am. And the fact that 1 in 37 children have it, and it's still something that's hard for parents to talk about. And I hope that as it's talked about a little bit more, parents aren't as shy and reluctant to speak about what's going on, and families aren't
Right.
so quick to judge. Because I think that's the other portion of this is that you always have somebody, oh, well, did you try this? And did you try that? And it's like, well, there's probably something else going on there. And I love that you guys aren't just looking at the behavioral, but it's like the behavior means that there's probably something medical going on and that you shouldn't just ignore the behavior or treat the behavior. Because I know, like in the autism community, we have a lot of that where we treat the behaviors and it's like, well, what's the underlying symptom, right? That's causing those behaviors. And that seems to be a very big focus of what Feeding Matters does.
Yeah, and we actually do have a webinar on autism and feeding on our website, which is really informative because Bethany talks about, again, like it's not just my child is autistic, but what else is going on with feeding that, there could be a lot of GI issues going on. There's a lot of discomfort. And so that's why, again, it's so important to look at the four domains. And again, and I'm also a parent leader with raising special kids and Feeding Matters. And so many of the families that, so many of the families that I've talked to, they're so stressed out over my child only eats French fries. I can't get any, fruits or vegetables. I can't get vitamins in. And, my role, if that's what your child eats, that's what your child eats. Thank God he has that one item that he can safely eat. But let's see, well, there are other things, other ways of getting the nutrients in. And again, it's not as simple as like when we grew up, you sit down, you eat at the table with your family, you eat what your parents have made, you eat it until it's gone, and then you leave the table. That would be lovely, but it's just not how our world looks anymore. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah, we know with our son, he is a very picky eater, but we also had a very long stretch where he wasn't sleeping at night. And so we decided to make him gluten free, which took us a long time to find good replacement foods. But as soon as we did
mm,
that, he slept through the night. And so it turns out he's got some kind of a gluten intolerance, which is very common among autistic children, that he was, I think, digesting or cramping or something that was like causing him to wake up every single night because his body wasn't processing that molecule correctly. And so I think it's really important that when our children have these behaviors where they're not sleeping at night or they're not doing this or they're not doing that, that we don't just try to mask the behaviors with something else and cover them up, right? So people are always telling us, oh, well, you should, put him on a sleeping med or something. I'm like, but something's happening there. Like what's the underlying thing that's causing him to not sleep? Because it's not, I would love to give him medicine that will just make him knock out. But there's probably something else going on. And I've shared that story with a lot of other people, and they're like, yes, as soon as I took gluten away from my son's diet, they slept through the night. So I love that idea of looking at the medical. What is happening to shape those feeding behaviors? Because it's probably not, it's probably not just them being picky. There's something else going on there.
Well, I'm so excited that your son is sleeping through the night and that you were able to figure that out.
Me too. That was about 3 years. I think Matt and I went about 3 years with no sleep. It was a lot, but yeah, sleep is good. So I don't think I have any more questions. You really covered everything very well. I'm just going through my notes. I love the amount of education that you have on your website. I have been on that website. It's beautiful. I love the content. And I really love what you guys are doing to try to take the stigma away from having a child who has feeding difficulties and giving that individual diagnosis. Because if you don't have a higher diagnosis like autism, how do you get the medical community to bill, right, for something so that you're not paying all of these out of pocket costs because you don't, like, we have a diagnosis of autism. We can get a lot of stuff covered because of that diagnosis. But if you have a failure to
Right.
thrive diagnosis, I can't imagine that has to be a difficult thing to get insurance providers to cover a lot of those therapies.
Yeah, and for sure, Michelle, you bring up a really valid point. Right now, we have another research project on early intervention services. So currently in the state of Arizona, and I know we are like one of, I think I want to say 4 states, but feeding is not a qualifying diagnosis.
Mm,
And you need at least a 50% delay in the four that are qualifying. So again, we are really working to ensure that PFD is a qualifying diagnosis for early intervention so that these families, instead of, if your child is on the spectrum or like Hayden has a seizure disorder, that's how we get the services. But for a child who only has PFD, they're not getting treatment and it's not covered, and families have to pay out of pocket. And then the insurance companies only pay for like 25 visits. And so we did an economic impact survey a couple years ago, and families are paying over $30,000 of out of pocket expenses. They have been forced to take out a second mortgage. They've had to replace carpeting from all the vomiting. And again, it's just no parent should have to go through that on top of trying to raise a family and trying to, ensure that you're doing everything that you should for your child.
well, and
So it shouldn't be a battle.
it's absolutely stunning that something as important and critical to survival as feeding isn't a
Mhm,
qualifying thing for early intervention, right? Like, isn't that just absolutely mind blowing? It, how
mhm.
how does that make any kind of sense? Because if they're not feeding, they're not growing, they're not developing, they're not hitting milestones, you're probably
They're
then
not
causing
learning.
them into and forcing them into
Mhm.
other diagnoses, right? Because your body needs nutrients in order to develop correctly.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It always blows my mind about how much work there is to do still within our systems of care, but also how many great people are there doing the work. So I really appreciate you. I really appreciate Feeding Matters and like the amazing amount of work and effort and energy they put into this, into helping other families. I just think it is phenomenal. And again, I am floored by all of this information that you shared with us and
Well,
just
thank you.
the amazing success that they've had in getting this recognized as an individual disorder. I think it's fantastic.
We're so pleased to be able to offer this, and we're just going to keep plugging away until, everyone knows what PFD is and more families are supported, and children and infants, it's caught early on so it doesn't become a disability.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. Thank you so much for coming today and for sharing all of this wonderful
Mhm.
information with the community.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for watching this webinar. If this webinar helped empower you by giving you information that you didn't know before, please consider becoming a DAMES member. We have over 25 educational webinars like this one on our website, ready for you to watch on your time. I hope to see you there, and I hope you know that you are never alone.